is always dangerous. But I mean, it's like Paul. I see Paul's on the call as well. For me, he's at the bottom here. But and you know, I know Paul's got little ones, and as we all know, working from home is it's like now because I'm in my office. If Emma's trying to put little Bowie, who's only 7 months old, and he's teething, and Hudson is nearly 3 and he's shouting. So you sometimes you're trying to concentrate or be on these Zoom calls, and you know, as you're talking in the background, you've got and you're just like, okay, let's focus on things. But and Mick, welcome, sir.
Anthony,
how are you?
I'm really good. That's a great name for your child, by the way, Bowie.
Yes, we it sounds like 2 American cops, Hudson and Bowie.
Yeah, great. Double act in the making.
It is. They're already a comedy double act for about 27 hours a day at the moment. But Mick, where are you? Because you sound like you're in the bath, but
I sound like I'm in the bath.
Yeah, it doesn't sound as clear as it does over here. That's not that we can't hear you, but I just wondered whereabouts you are.
I'm up in Lancashire, but that shouldn't have any impact on the quality of the transmission.
It's probably the time zone difference then.
Yeah, that'll be it. Yeah.
Mick,
I'll just wind my earphones up, shall I?
That's right. Put your ear thing in. Can you explain to the guys on the call actually how we met, if you can remember?
Yeah. So when was that? About 3 years ago, maybe now. We met at a training course run by I can't remember his name. What was his name?
David Key.
David Key. I see so many emails from him. I'm surprised I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
So we had probably both of us a life-changing experience on that training course for, what was it, about 7 days?
Yeah, that was at Nebworth House, wasn't it?
Yeah, Nebworth House, yeah.
And how would you describe, when you say life-changing experience, I'm guessing other guys are like, I want to hear more about that. So how would you describe what that was for us?
Well, I mean, I'm a business coach, so it was really helpful for me to, I suppose, get away from when I was coaching people. I guess prior to that, I think I was trying to achieve things with my clients that I thought was for their own good, because I knew what they needed to do, and I think what I got from it was really just the confidence to go in there and listen and tune in to the people that were in front of me, and not be arrogant enough to think that I knew what was going on.
Which isn't easy sometimes.
Yeah. And you know, we talked about the 3 principles a lot, and I think that just relaxes you and makes you more aware of yourself and your surroundings, really.
Mick, could you, for the guys that wouldn't know, how can you sum up what the 3 principles are in a nutshell?
God.
Oh God, that's one.
In a nutshell, that is a tough one. Yes. So 3 principles of mind, consciousness, and thought. And I suppose I'm trying to think about how to condense all this, because you can go on for ages about it. But it's kind of like letting go of it, really. It's like letting go of the things that you feel like you're supposed to do, and the things that you're supposed to think, and just being in the present and looking after yourself and looking after the people around you.
Yes.
That's probably, I don't know, that's just coming out as I'm thinking, really, but letting go comes across strongly for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, being true to yourself, being confident in your own skin, and making the most of what there is ahead of you, and not trying to overthink things and complicate things, you know.
I think you said it was a whole, I mean, it's kind of 7 days, wasn't it? So it was a very immersive experience. And I think John Downs, who's in the middle of my screen, but on the call there as well, we've been through like 3 of the big Tony Robbins experiences in London, in Tenerife, and in Miami. And, you know, transforming your life. is hard when you're just on your own, but when you're in an environment where you've got other people who are thinking like you, want to develop like you, I think it's a lot easier.
And we've actually found that sort of ongoing connection as well, haven't we? So there's 3 of us that have kept in touch with each other over sort of every 6 or 8 weeks. And I mean, Ant and I were just catching up this week and just saying we both reminded each other of the value of some of that content and just going back over it and being reminded of it, because sometimes you're sort of there in the moment and you really enjoy it and you get that transformation. It's very hard to take a lot in one go. But when you come back to it and review it, there's you get reminded of that moment, and also there's some sort of more content that comes through, isn't there?
Yeah.
And Mick, how are you now? So are you up in Lancashire permanently? Was it Lancashire before I say that?
Yeah. That's where I'm from, and that's where I still am. Yeah. That's where I've been all my life, actually. I've travelled up and down the M6 and the M1 quite a few times. Worked for businesses down in the south, worked for Coca-Cola and Heinz and people like that. And I've set up my own business 7 years ago as a business coach, self-employed. It's me and my business, basically. So bit of a lifestyle thing, but also, hoping that I can have an impact myself on people's lives as well and get them to have insights. The other thing, I guess, that came out of the 7 days was how you know a lot more than you think you know. Yeah. And sometimes it just takes a question to unlock that insight and actually then enable you to make a decision that's inspired by yourself, that you then take ownership for and take action and get results.
Yeah, and you're right, because it actually, part of that, it brings it back to me of that reminder. And I remember with David Key, he was actually on our Whole Man Academy podcast, probably about 10, 12 episodes in. And, he's introduced us to some interesting people. And I remember one of the big things for him was about not feeling like you need or letting go of control. So not feeling like you need to know every step, which I said was a bit like us with the Whole Man Academy. We didn't set it out with a 25-point plan. It was like, let's do an event and move on. Yeah. Interesting times. And Robin has just joined us, who's at the bottom of the screen for me. Robin is part of our team as well. So we've got a good group in here. Well, one of the things that I've just written about for our newsletter tomorrow was about books that can change your life. So these are it's a bit difficult when you've got the wanky screen behind you, but these are the 2 that I've put up. Which you probably can't even see, but anyway. And I just wondered if you could each share one book, and it hasn't got to be something that dramatic, but one book that you would say could or has changed your life. And who would we like to start with? Let's start with John Downs.
Oh, well, as you put me on the spot, I would have to start with the Bible. And I guess that's where my journey started, really. So big book, a lot of content. It's quite a lot of stuff to get your head around, but some really good principles in there. I think more, and I'm just looking at my bookshelf now. There's so many books. There's David Rock's Your Mind at Work, Your Brain at Work was brilliant for an introduction to neuroscience. But I think one of the books that got me into business was the Millionaire Mindset. That I just remember. Oh, I've got too many books coming to mind now. I just remember listening to that. I used to have a sort of a 1.5 mile walk into work and back every day, and that was just a great. It was about 2 miles. Great sort of training time for me. I used to just be plugged into a book the whole time, and it was probably one of the first audio packages I bought. And it just talks lots of different examples of entrepreneurs from all over the country and their journey of going through business and some of the issues and risks with that. I'm trying to remember the name of the guy that wrote it. It was based on an experience that he had when he found himself sat next to Richard Branson on a plane journey, and the resulting conversation from that, and then the insights that he had for his business and how that went forward. So that was a pretty amazing book.
And did you find with that? One of my big frustrations is, and myself as much as some of the people I spoke to, often you can read a book which is inspiring, but it's entertainment, and then you just move on to the next book. So did you feel that you took some action after that kind of, developed you as a person?
Yeah, it was a bit like one of those, I just felt like I'd been in the presence of a lot of people that had been and done the journey. And it was the sharing of that experience. It's that sense of being surrounded by people that have been through it before. And that, so I think it was a combination of some practical advice that came from it, but also just a sense of being in the company of others that had been there and done it. And somehow that was quite like a visceral supporting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good answer. I'll give you that one.
Right, thank you.
Nick, how about yourself, Nick? What book comes to mind, if any at all?
Well, probably How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That didn't work, eh?
Which is clearly I should have read a long time ago. Yeah, exactly. Which remains valid and relevant. And I remember reading it early on in my career. And it's probably the most underlined and thumbed book I've got. Because I was just constantly amazed by the logic and the simplicity of everything in there. And looking at that book, I remember just thinking, as we all go into adulthood and try and live a good life, this is almost like a manual. You get a car, you get a manual for it. You get a new bit of kit, it comes with a manual. We should all read a good book like this. So I probably haven't gone back to it as I probably should. But it gave me confidence, and it made me realize that not being a jerk was relatively easy to achieve. That was one of the bits of advice that my CEO in my last company gave me. I was talking to him one day over lunch, and I said, what advice could you give to an aspiring leader like myself? And he said, don't be a jerk. Just don't be a jerk with people around you. And I said, do you want to say any more? He said, no, not really. He said, that's just the way I've lived my life. And if I feel I'm being a jerk, I kind of know when I am. And I catch myself doing it, and I tell myself to stop it. So that's the best advice that I can give you. He said somebody gave him that early on in his career at Procter & Gamble, and it's done him pretty well. So his advice was don't be a jerk. And How to Win Friends and Influence People was equally simple. And that's probably had a fairly profound effect on my life. Yeah.
Would you say, Nick, I was thinking with that book, I know I've read it twice, and I haven't read it for quite a few years, and I possibly did the same. I've got a lot of it highlighted. Yeah. But it is one of those books that you could, revisit every, 5 years and just go, oh yeah, I've forgotten a lot of that stuff.
I think that's absolutely right. And I've just made myself a note to do exactly that, actually. Because it doesn't date. And the fact that, the stories in it date and the case studies and things date, but you can whiz through all of that. Read the chapter headings and go, yep, okay, that's a good reminder about how not to be a jerk.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. Well, thank you, Nick.
On that, actually. Just talking about Procter & Gamble and the guy, Nick, who mentioned about not being a jerk. I had a good mentor from P&G. And anyone familiar with P&G is very much promotion from within. And so you start as a graduate and you go up and up. And typically you end up, because it used to be pack and go in order to actually, they used to move around the globe with different roles. And pretty much towards the end of your career, they try and get you back to your home territory.
Right.
And I was a fairly green graduate and working with one of the guys who was on his final 3 years, so he got him back into the UK. He headed up one of the pharma divisions, which is very small, or was very small within P&G. And we were implementing some new system. And I think I was looking after the finance side of it all. And then he called us in just before the go live. We were doing a kind of go, no-go cut type decision. And one thing, he goes, okay, so I take it you're all ready, everything there. And he goes, right, what about paying people? And I said, yeah, we've got all that stuff. We have to do all that. I'm sure we'll be able to get all that done. He goes, no, really. If you've got everyone really geared up, you've got, we're doing changing part of the factory. You've got color workers who are on weekly wages. They've got mortgages and everything else. unless you can guarantee that those guys are going to be paid and what contingency you're going to put in place, you're not going live. They don't care about all the other stuff. The customers, yep, they're obviously incredibly important. Likewise, the suppliers. But it's your people first. And very similar to being don't be a jerk is make sure you don't jerk your people around as well.
Absolutely.
And it's stuck with me ever since. And that must be at least 25 years ago. So a very similar anecdote. Just when you mentioned P&G, it just came back into my mind, actually.
One good piece of advice that I've heard recently is that, you know, people talk about be optimistic and hopeful and kind and all that. Sometimes for some people that doesn't come natural, and it actually is much harder work to be a good person than not. It takes, you know, it's really takes a lot of energy to be optimistic. So I heard this a saying of like, okay, fine, don't be optimistic, just don't be a jerk. Just don't be pessimistic. Just don't do that, right? So by default, like just that you can do. You can not do something. It's a lot easier than doing something. So I guess sometimes if I'm feeling a bit less energy, at least I can just not be a jerk. And it's a lot easier to do if I'm not feeling it.
Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. It's certainly, you know, his words stuck with me throughout my whole career. And, you know, I think there are times as a leader, as a boss, that I kind of know that I've been venturing into jerk territory. And you've got to go, right, hang on. You are going to be a dick here if you're not careful. So
come and work at BAE.
There what, sorry?
Come and work at BAE Systems.
Is there a lot of that going on?
There's a load of jerks around there.
Really? Is that right? Sadly.
Yeah.
But I think what a couple of you have pointed at there is sometimes it's the simplest stuff which is memorable. It's a bit like with one of our courses that we're working on. You know, you can give people these huge swathes of kind of brilliant advice, but if they can't remember them over the years, then it's useless. But if you can be like, hold on a minute, you know, where's my jerkometer? I've just made that up, but you can have that if you want. Then it
sounds like something completely different.
Yeah. I think it's an internet site, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So, Mr. Ramos, seeing as you given us that little bit there, would you like to give us a book that maybe has done something for you in your life?
Yeah, I'm a bit embarrassed that like nowadays with young children, I mean, it's just totally just an excuse. But I've not read nearly as much as when I used to. I just don't have like the mental energy at the end of the day to read a book, man. I can't do it. So in the past though, one thing that really keeps on coming back to me, it's funny, it literally is just a chapter in a book that I read must be 15 years ago. And every year I revisit that idea of the chapter, and it's actually paid huge dividends. Like it's gotten me huge things in my life. And that's a book by this guy called Chris Guillebeau. Do you guys know him? He has this podcast called The Side Hustle something or other. He's all about side hustling. He traveled around. He visited every country in the world in his 30s, and that's what first got him known. But Chris Guillebeau, he wrote a book a while ago, and he's still very present now, called the Art of Non-Conformity. And there was a chapter that he basically, it was kind of like project management for your life. And I just modified that. And I did this thing that sometimes I talk about. I call it I was writing down here. I call it my 3131 plan. I actually wrote it down as we were talking. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah. 3131, right? On that axis. It stands for 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, 1 lifetime. And you know that the analogy where you have the rocks and the pebbles in the jar, and you know you keep the room for the big river rocks, and that's the important stuff. And really, with all of us, there's only a handful of things that are really important, like literally 5. And that, you know, that might be your health, your relationship, your marriage, as a family, your whatever you choose as a career. Spiritually, it could be, for me, travel and adventures in there. There's just a handful of things. And you put that on this axis and you say, okay, what am I going to do in the next 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, and 1 lifetime as your mission statement to get that done? I think over time I found that you can't plan for 3 years. Forget about it. You can plan for a lifetime, head in that sort of general direction in terms of what kind of person you want to be. But the most effective has been in that 1 year. So I've kind of divided things up into like 3 months. What am I going to do now? Every 3 months, until September, and then until January, like specifically. And then, like, as an example, I wrote here, what I'm going to do to make, how I'm going to make what I'm doing now that I enjoy is my 20% of my income to 80%. How am I going to flip it? What step am I going to take now to make that happen, to sort of move that ball along? And like literally now, so that in 3 months from now, I'm on to the next thing. And that's, so that chapter really helped me to sort of plan out my life in a really practical way. And it's paid off huge. You can do it for your health, for your relationship, and for your career, like in terms of having something that's doable and with a timeline. Like right now, I said I'm gonna just start with writing a list for organizations to reach out to that I want to work with. Done that. That took a while. Step 2, email all of them, right? And then step 3, eventually in 6 months, have a project in the works with them. So that's kind of like where I'm at now. And actually today I got word back that I'm gonna make a film. Like it just like literally just today already. I'm already where I want to be in 6 months today.
Oh, right.
Cool.
Brilliant.
Well done.
Made a move.
And Paul, what I wrote down from what you were saying was, that it doesn't really matter what vehicle you use to get you to kind of pay attention to yourself and focus on yourself. But I wrote down it gives you structure, focus, and that leads to action. Because most people don't give themselves the gift of actually sitting down and saying, right, what am I going to do? What do I want? And how am I going to get it?
Yeah, and I think Tony Robbins talks about this a lot as well. Tony Robbins and I got stuck on a desert island also once, but he was in a little tape, and I played it over and over and over. But he was in my ears. Where like, what can I do right here, right now that's very solid? And I can write a list of the organizations that I want to work with. I can do that. And I know if I make a list of 50, I know that 49 of them are going to say no, and I'm cool with that. But like, I can write that list, and then I know I can email them. Like, and that took a bit of work though, because I had to like link in with those certain people. Then when they linked in with me, then I got their email address. Then I would reach out to them, and that's already led to some things. But like, I know that there's things I can do now that are solid steps that can at least like move me in that direction, even if it's just like a couple centimeters. Yeah. At least I'm moving. And then
great stuff.
And then you look back, 3, 6, 12 months from now, and those little steps that you take or took.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's amazing what you can get done. And you can even do this like a lot of my categories have been pretty good. And I must admit, historically, the poorest ones have been my physical health. And also the time I take for the relationship with my wife. Like, we're so busy that, people actually have date nights like once a week. I'm like, who are these people? That's awesome. That's good. Like, how, so that's probably my biggest struggle, to be honest. But that's a constant thing that I just need to be honest, and I need to prioritize.
Yeah,
really.
It's good to hear someone else say that, because we said, we were going to try and do that. And I think that was in January. So we'll see. All right. Well, let's move on. Mr. John Hines, sir, if you are able to unmute yourself and give us some pearls of wisdom on your book.
Sure. Yeah, that's a chainsaw outside my window, so I didn't want anybody to hear it. I'm going to have to say 2. I would agree with Jonathan about the Bible. And I know that the minute somebody says a word like that, lots of stereotypes go up about it's a religious text and all that's wrong or right with religion and whatnot. But to get into it, it's a collection. It's not one book. It's a collection of several books written by all kinds of different authors from all kinds of different walks of life, from different places and different moments in time. And religious aspects aside, there's so much wisdom in there in terms of leadership and how to work through life and how to walk through life and how people respond to things. I did catch this statistic a couple weeks ago that it apparently has comfortably sat at the #1 bestseller in the world for centuries. And I thought, okay, Christian or not, there's a point to that. And then I found out that the #2 best-selling book of all time is a book about the #1 best-selling book of all time. So, Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And I thought, well, there's got to be something there. I get into that. But I think recently, the book that's really helped me out a lot, it's something I'm working on in lockdown, is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh.
Oh, excellent. It's one of those gift that keeps on giving kind of books. You read it through and then you just want to start diving right back into it again. You'll wear it out. He is full of amazing little bits of wisdom in that. He's got this great premise that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. Or we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our habits. And he's getting you to think of goals, not in terms of this thing that you're going to do by the end of, say, lockdown, but the habits you're going to build along the way that makes that happen. I'm reminded when I turned 40 some time ago, I decided that I wanted to give to myself, as a birthday gift to myself, the ability to run a mile in 7 minutes. Which I hadn't done since, high school. And that's a great goal. That's a great thing to do. But it meant getting into the habit for my entire 39th year of getting up and going to one of those crazy, god-awful boot camp classes in the morning and working my ass off every day. But I don't look back on achieving that goal as running a mile in less than 7 minutes. I look back on achieving that habit of getting up and doing something for myself every day along the way.
Mm. The little compound decisions.
It's the little compound decisions and the habits that build upon habits. It's not so much at this point in time, I'm going to have done this. It's more like every day, I'm going to do a little bit of this every day. And that's been absolutely brilliant.
And what was it called again, John?
It is called Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
By James Clear. I remember when I first stumbled on it, I felt like I'd crawled out from under a rock. Like the world seems to have already read this thing a bunch of times. And nuts all over it. He's got an amazing podcast. He's got a really thought-provoking Twitter feed.
Well, that's why it's another reason why we do these is sometimes probably between us we've all heard of lots of different good books, personal development books, but I love it when you hear one and it sparks an interest. You think, oh, perhaps I'll check that one out. Not to be confused with Atomic Kitten if you're googling.
No, not at all.
Just to confirm. Have you read any stuff by Atomic Kitten at all, John?
No,
I didn't think so. Just checking.
Wasn't that punk group that got arrested by Putin?
No, you're thinking of Pussy something, yeah.
That's something.
Pussy Riot.
There you go. Robin knows.
Yeah.
Who's next then? Thomas?
Yeah. With me, this was back when I was a football referee. I basically bought the Graham Poll book, his first book, which basically was an autobiography about how he started refereeing, moved up the leagues and became a World Cup referee, and of course famous for that incident where he showed 3 yellow cards. Yeah. He actually inspired me at that time when I was a football referee, learning the ropes, so to speak, and it just inspired me that no matter how many times you get verbally abused and you want to just pack it in, he basically carried on. He spoke to his dad at the time when he was like 15, 16, getting verbally abused, even when he was like 20, 21 and just reaching the semi-pro football side of it. At that time, it actually inspired me just to ignore all those players and supporters that were there verbally abusing me, and I just cracked on with my refereeing. I did it for 11 years and it put me in good stead. I officiated in the FA Cup. I've officiated in the FA Trophy, and I had 2 County Cup finals as well in my 11 years as a referee. So it did put me in good stead. And it's not like the other books that have been mentioned, but an autobiography does actually have an influence.
Yeah,
it depends on what type of profession it's coming from. It could be sport. At the moment, I'm reading Jensen Button's new book of how to be a Formula One driver. I'm never going to get there, but it's an interesting read.
Never say never, Tom.
Well, I'm too tall.
Not just
too old, too tall.
Yeah. That's a positive spin on that. Say, look, I'm just too old. I mean, you've got the talent, but
well, yeah, I'll play it on the PlayStation.
Yeah, I mean that van you crashed that time.
Yeah, let's not go there, please.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Please, there's too many people that don't want to know about my driving habit.
There's too many people that want to put a claim in. But I think the important thing you point out there is, I 100% agree. When I was trying to pick, sometimes it is hard, probably for all of us, to pick one or two books. And the ones I was going to write about or have written about in the newsletter, in the e-letter tomorrow, for me, actually, one of the great books, has been the book that Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the footballer, wrote, just for his honesty and the difficulty for him of, the challenges of being a footballer. The boredom was one. And one of the other ones was one of these moments where he said he was in the stadium, I think in Italy, playing, about to start the match, and he gets a call from his wife who was pregnant, and she was in a car waiting to get into the stadium, and the opposing fans had seen her, and one of them had reached through the window and punched her. And as he said, you imagine you're him, you can't go out the stadium and sort it out because you're about to go on the pitch. And, it was hard to understand what someone like him has gone through at different times. So yeah, I agree. I think, autobiographies can be as powerful as anything else, to be honest. And for the guys watching, you stopped refereeing, but I remember hearing some of the abuse. I mean, we've all seen it at refs. Do you miss anything about refereeing?
Not at all. Not at all. It was, towards the end of my career, it was quite harrowing that, they get underneath the skin, and you try not to let them. But, when your name's published in match reports and, especially for my surname, it's quite distinctive. So you can actually find me. That they sometimes actually say, I know where you live. If I make a decision against them or a penalty against them and stuff like that. And it just got too bad for me to carry on. And I had a young family at the time, and I thought, you know what, I'd rather free up my Saturday and spend time with them than rather run around a pitch getting verbally abused for about 35 quid.
Yeah, no, I don't suppose any of us are disagreeing with that one. And again, I've seen it firsthand, where you just think maybe that's a good point. At the moment, though, a lot of guys, especially, don't get that chance to go to a sporting occasion and vent at someone, and it's like a pressure valve that builds up. So that's why I'm pleased that football is back on, just to give the guys something to shout at a screen around, to be honest. But maybe that's just me. Peter, how about yourself, sir?
How about me? Right. Well, I don't fit into any category.
Good.
I'm like to think of myself as actively retired. I was in education, but I had to retire early at the age of 46 because I'd had a long history of depression and psychosis and things like that, which, despite my best efforts, in the end, it just got too much. And I talked it over with the consultant psychiatrist, and he said, yes, we can, I will support you in, taking retirement on health grounds. So I was 46, so that was 30, I'm 78 now, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I have read extensively around issues to do with mental health and all sorts of other things as well. One of the books that helped me early on was The Road Less Travelled by M. Scott Peck, who's an American psychiatrist. The Road Less Travelled is taken from a poem. I've got my book on the shelf, all marked up and everything, but I can't remember it all. And it was taken from a poem by somebody whose name I can't remember. He said that he was in a wood and there were two ways to go, and he chose the road that was less travelled. And I think the essence of Scott Peck's work really was to get away from the idea of mental health and more towards that of spiritual health. Not spiritual in the religious sense, although that will work for some people in part or in whole. So it's about the things that are not tangible, the things that you can't pick up, the things that you can't see. If I remember right, it was in that book that I came across the principle of homeostasis, or homeostasis, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah.
The self-balancing principle, where everything tends to want to get itself back into balance, and that sometimes the things that we do actually inhibit that self-balancing. And I found that principle very, very helpful ever since I read that. It must have been 20, 25 years ago, I suppose. So that's one of the memorable books as far as I'm concerned. But I've got about 200 or 300 books here on all sorts of subjects. I belong to a reading group with U3A, so we share books when we're in session once a month. So I've got quite an eclectic set of stuff, many of them are actually marked up quite obsessively.
Yeah.
But they are there to be referred to, and they have become my copy of the book. They've become part of me, and I've only got to look. If I were to go into my bedroom now, I would be able to look at the shelf, and I would immediately be able to get a feeling off that shelf from the stuff that I've read, and with little post-it markers in it and that sort of thing, and I could pick it up and revisit that book in a relatively short time, and that's the best I can say, really. It's just be eclectic and look for inner balance, really.
I like it. It's probably the best answer we've had so far.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why it's interesting. If and when you read the e-letter tomorrow, for me, I write about the joy of a real tangible book instead of an e-book. And one of the points was that you can feel it, you can smell it, you can touch
absolutely.
it, you can mark it, and you can have it signed by the author, which sounds silly, but it meant something to me. So that's I've also written down the road less traveled. I like to investigate these things. So thank you for that, Peter.
Okay.
And Mick, how about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, Peter, you're a great testimony to early retirement, I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah.
Actually, some of the things that a few of you have said have reminded me of a quote from a guy called Professor Louis Tice. I don't know if any of you have heard of Professor Louis Tice. He's in a training course when I was at Coca-Cola. He used to be a American football coach. So Paul, you don't know him? No.
Yep.
The quote that comes to mind is, "You move toward and become like whatever it is you think about." Whether that's good or whether
say that again, mate. Say that again.
You move towards and become like whatever it is you think about.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, interesting one. The two books for me, we were talking about the three principles earlier. If you're interested in the three principles, a great book that you can read in no time at all is The Enchanted Gardener by Sydney Banks, which is a bit of a fable, but gets over the message of looking forward, not looking back, basically, and that psychologists look far too much backwards than they do look forwards. So that's an interesting one. The one that stands out for me and always comes out top of my list is Simon Sinek, Start With Why.
Yeah.
Which is really trying to, for people as individuals and for businesses, and he targets it at businesses really, to understand what it is that their purpose is. You know, so when I'm coaching my clients, I spend as long talking about this as I do their financial performance and their goals and objectives. Because if a company and an individual, or an individual, can find out what it is that resonates with them and why they do what they do, other than, you know, putting food on the table and a roof above your head, if you can find out what that is, it inspires you and motivates you and gets you out of bed every morning wanting to go out and do it again. We all get rewarded, you know, we all get paid. But that's, you know, whatever you get, you always want more. And what people don't have enough of is that inner desire, that inner drive that's more emotional and therefore more important and more impactful. So I say to organizations, you know, let's look at what it is that you contribute to the world. They go, what do you mean the world? Well, what do you do? What is it that you contribute? Let's understand what that is. And then most importantly, when we've identified what it is you do, what impact does that have on other people's lives? Because every organization on the planet has a positive impact on other people's lives. And if you can encapsulate that and get it into a succinct and impactful statement, that's something that you can spread throughout an organization, and it becomes a golden thread that runs from top to bottom of an organization and from bottom to top, that unites everyone and gets everybody singing out the same hymn book, and going for the same things really, and having the extra motivation to do it. And it works great for an organization, but it also works great for individuals as well.
I've just started doing some work as part of an IT accelerator in Worcestershire, and they've got a new cohort of 8 through, and they've got a business coach, but they've brought me on as what they've called a behavioural coach. But really, that's my job, is to help really check their connection between their why and their product, because it really is, isn't it? I mean, if that's not there, then under pressure, whatever that pressure might be, that determines how likely you are to push through, depending on how connected you are with your topic. You know, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's some great examples. There's lots of companies that don't have it, but it stands the test of time. I mean, the Wright brothers, who invented manned flight, they had a why to to be the first to bring this to the world, to give the value to the world of people being able to transport themselves into other countries. At the same time, there was a guy whose name I can't remember now, who was employed by the government, was academically very, very well qualified, who had all the money at his disposal, all the budget to go out and achieve man-made flight. That was his objective. He was employed by the government, as I say. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to do it to be famous. Whereas the Wright brothers just wanted it to give that to humanity. They had no money. They had no real academic ability. But they had a team of people that bought into the same purpose and the same vision, and they were motivated to do it. And they were the guys that did it. Against all odds.
Yeah, it sounds similar to Elon Musk as well at SpaceX. I'm not sure if anyone watched the flight to get to the ISS and the launch of the Falcon rockets, but he did a bit of a speech after. It was quite emotional. But he came across saying that actually, for the benefit of humanity, it's the space station first, then it's going to be the moon, then Mars, but had a much bigger grand plans. And the fact that NASA have entrusted him to try and help them get to different things. But,
it's making humankind a multi-planetary species is his sort of primary goal in life. So yeah,
absolutely.
I love that video he's got from 5 years ago when Neil Armstrong was one of his biggest critics.
Yeah, he was really upset.
And he's almost in tears.
He is.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, things we've mentioned that. Do any of you know who Robert Zubrin is?
I do now.
John does. So he was the author of the book, and basically was Elon Musk's kind of right-hand man. But we just interviewed him for our podcast last week, so that will be on our podcast in 2 weeks' time.
Right.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, as you do. I think he was based out in California. So he's, very, very, very close to Elon Musk. So it was quite topical having.
Wow, very good.
I must admit, they didn't do the SpaceX launch just to coincide with our podcast. It's the other way around. But there's
You
been
timed that very well.
Yeah, it's impressive timing by us. And Robin, you are last in the chair to. Apparently, you read a bit. I know you write a bit. Actually, could you tell the chaps that don't know, like who you write for? What kind of publications?
Who do I write for? I write for the New York Times and the FT. I write for GQ. I write for a number of titles, really. I suppose those are probably the most famous, which probably makes it sound as if I'm going to come across as being extremely well read and have lots of useful things to say. But the funny thing about being a journalist and writing things routinely is that you do a lot of you read an awful lot of short stuff. So I read a lot of copy that is written within my world, and I read a lot of broadsheet newspaper journalism, I suppose, that is in a style that I aspire to write in myself. So I think somebody earlier said that a lot of what you read affects how you think about things and who you are. And so I read a lot that inspires me to write in a way that I want to be read. But to answer the question of which books have most inspired us and which we would recommend, I mean, I'm going to be the third person to say that the Bible is probably the first book that I would want to recommend to anyone for very similar reasons to those that have been mentioned. And that, of course, is irrespective of Mr. Trump's decision to wave one around in the air very awkwardly this week. I think it's sort of, and the reason because in a sense it's like the ultimate. I think it was John who mentioned the significant amount of wisdom that there is in the Bible, and so many of the self-help books that have been written since owe much of their reason for existence to the Bible itself in the first place. So, one of the greatest commandments is love your neighbour as yourself. The sort of very nature of most self-help books is to try and help you be a better person and to be better to those around you. Don't be a jerk, as we've been saying, from that central commandment. So, and then I think some of the books that I've read around the Bible have really impacted me as well. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, who of course is far more famous for having written the Chronicles of Narnia. It's an extraordinary book. It's a wonderful exposition of the sort of central theology of the Bible, and I think the part that has always stayed with me is the part on moral law, and this business of what good is, what makes us good, and what helps us to define what good even is in the first place. And C.S. Lewis's argument is that has to come from some sort of divine benevolent force. There is no other sort of logical explanation for it, and I'm not nearly erudite enough to explain that theory nearly as well as he does. So I would recommend you read the first part of that book, or indeed listen to him reading it as he did on Radio 4, I think it was, or 3 or something, 50, 60, 70 years ago during the Second World War. But and then a completely sort of opposite end of the spectrum, I suppose, would be to say that often, yes, the book which is impacting me most is the one that I can remember putting down last. And I'm currently reading David Mitchell's Dishonesty is the Second Best Policy, which is his columns from The Observer, which are superbly well written. Each column takes, 5 minutes to read or something like that, and offers a nugget of wisdom, which I often sort of fall asleep to, having just read. And I'd recommend that as both a very entertaining read, but also as there's an awful lot of sensible comment in there about the way that modern life works, and about the most influential figures in our life, and the most influential things in our life, such as social media, as one example. So those would be the three.
That's it, Mick. Take control. We've all had that before. All right, well, thank you, Robin. Actually, Robin, just one question: is who would you say you look up to as a writer?
Golly,
It's very few people taller than Robin, to be honest.
Yes, true.
in physical terms, not many. That's a very good question, because there's a wide range of people, I suppose, who I read fairly regularly, who's not all of them write in the same way. So whether I'm reading someone like Ed Conway, who's a Times columnist who has an exceptional ability to explain very complicated things in a way that I can understand them. Someone like, I don't know, Jeremy Clarkson, I think, is an absolutely magnificent writer, completely different style, and his intention is largely to entertain as much as it is to educate, and he uses hyperbole in a way that very few writers ever have done. So yeah, fairly broad spectrum, but I tend to read people like Hugo Rifkin quite regularly. He's a peer of mine in terms of age group. I don't know him, but the commentators generally, people who in 800 words can say something very significant that I can take away with me to have a think about during the course of a day.
Good answer. I won't pretend I know what hyperbole means, but I've learnt these days to ask instead of just nodding and thinking I don't know what that means. But at least
round exaggeration is probably the snappiest explanation of that word.
Sounds like some of the stuff our 3-year-old comes out with.
I always saw it written down. I thought it was hyperbole. I assumed it was some sort of American game. But
see, we're learning as we go along. Well, hopefully, especially after, say, what Peter said about the nice thing about reading books, and maybe going back to the old school of them being in a print formation instead of digital is that's why I thought it'd be interesting, especially with writing the e-letter for hopefully somebody to read tomorrow. It's something to think about. Well, chaps, I'll tie this up because I know we've all got, I was going to say, people to see and places to go, but we know none of us have got anywhere to really go, unfortunately. But yeah, so our next one will be on, I think it's the 2nd of July, so the first Thursday of every month, but 2nd of July, if if any of us are available. And who knows where we'll be by then. We'll probably have to have a bag over our head as well as a mask or something. And an interesting one to finish on there is that you have to go out with something covering you, but it doesn't matter what it is. So, it's good to see that wearing a T-shirt over your mouth or some kind of taff can thing across your face is going to be effective. So if anybody wants to join the call next month with, a sock over their face or something, then that's totally up to you.
There was that video, wasn't there, the CCTV in one of the shops where the reception of the counter lady wasn't going to serve them, and so the lady was all in a huster, and she ended up taking out her tights and then her knickers and put them over her head and then got served. So there's lots of different face where you can actually put on.
Well, I tell you,
don't knock it until you tried it.
Yeah. Thing is, Bill, a lot of people pay good money for that in Soho. But on that bombshell, I'll wish you all a very fine evening. And I just say I really appreciate you all spending your time. I look forward to these calls, not just because I get to see your faces, because I learn something during it, which I think is priceless. So chaps, I hope you enjoy the e-letter tomorrow. No pressure to read it, and if you do, let me know, because I spent a lot of time working on it without spell check. And no pressure because I've got Robin reading it as well.
Great stuff, Anne. Well done.
Pleasure, chaps.
Nice to
we'll speak to you next month.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.